On May 24th, 2023, North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper declared a state of emergency on public education.
Stop the damage that will set back our schools for a generation.
This year, the North Carolina House Legislature signed Bill 823, Choose Your School, Choose Your Future, which codifies eligibility and funding for families to use government grants to attend private schools. While previously the funding was limited to free and reduced eligible students, now a household of 4 with an income less than $210,000 can qualify for at least 60% of tuition scholarship. North Carolina is one of 32 states that have implemented and expanded funding for vouchers, tax breaks, and educational savings accounts that fund public school alternatives. But how did we even get here? Today, we're going to take a deep dive into EdChoice, one of the most vocal and well-established school choice think tank organizations in the mainstream. We're going to learn who they are, what their mission is, and how we can be critical about the means in which they influence school public policy. EdChoice was originally founded as the Friedman Foundation for Educational Choice in 1996, based in Indianapolis, Indiana, by Rose and Milton Friedman. Co-founder Milton Friedman is a Nobel laureate recognized for his contributions to free market capitalism and monetarism. Applying this philosophy to education, Friedman believed that parents, not the government, should have the largest say in what a kid's education should comprise. At the same time, the government should fund that education, as long as they don't monopolize it. Or, put it in Friedman's own words,
I don't assume that private schools are better than public schools. I assume that competition is better than monopoly. They say the public school system is doing a fine job. Well, if they really believe that, why should they be afraid of competition? Is that the money is strapped to the back of the child.
According to Friedman, free market competition would improve the current state of our education system. To create this vision, the Friedman Foundation implemented school voucher programs to fund private school education. EdChoice today recognizes Friedman's contributions to shaping historical policy in the school choice movement. The 2002 Supreme Court ruling Zelman v. Simmons Harris legitimized the constitutionality of an Ohio school voucher program to use to attend religious private schools. EdChoice also has an outstanding legacy receiving support and donor contributions from the Walton Foundation and the Lovett and Ruth Peters Foundation since 1996. The Walton Foundation is a loud supporter of charter schools, and the Peters being free market think tanks. EdChoice is also a historic member of the State Policy Network, a body of free market think tank nonprofit organizations. EdChoice does not publicly disclose their donors and donor contributions. However, since 2022, they release an annual report of their revenue and expenditures. So, in 2022, their revenue totaled around $11.5 million. 74% of this revenue came from foundations and donor-advised funds. The rest originated from individuals, 25%, and businesses, 1%. EdChoice is publicly affiliated with many other nonprofit organizations that share similar policy initiatives. For example, they have worked with the free market libertarian think tanks like the Reason Foundation and the Goldwater Institute. But on the other spectrum, they sponsored parent grassroots organizations that support school choice, such as Love Your School, Empowered Arizona Families, and A4 Arizona. With such funding and collaboration, it's apparent that EdChoice has grown and evolved, with Robert Enlow, now president and CEO of the organization since 2009, still taking charge. Today, EdChoice aims to defend and expand school choice initiatives through 4 pillars: research and thought leadership, training and outreach, policy and outreach, and legal advice. I'll take you through an overview of a few of the pillars. Pillar 1. Research and thought leadership. This is definitely the most robust of their contributions to the school choice movement, as many of their publications have been cited by the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, the Washington Post, Fox News, Associated Press, Forbes, and USA Today. Therefore, they have a lot of influence in the research they produce and distribute. On their website, they organize the research into 8 categories, with high publication volumes for 1. Surveys and polling, 2. Fiscal policy and analysis, 3. Empirical research, and 4. Thought leadership. In most publications, EdChoice references its membership with the American Association for Public Opinion Research, the AAPOR, since 2015. This means they follow the code of conduct as described by the organization, including abidance by Institutional Review Board. Thus, we can assume that some of their work is credible as they are with a legitimate organization. The EdChoice research team has also authored numerous publications from 1996 to today, but 93 of them are on ERIC. The majority of the first authors can be attributed to senior members of staff, including Drew, DePerma, and Shaw, all in high leadership. The CEO also is an author of very early books in EdChoice's publication history. This is interesting to point out because you can consider this being a conflict of interest, where a lot of the research led to their promotion. Although I did not spend too much time evaluating their research, I did critically analyze 2 recent publications. The first is a 2022 EdChoice Study Guide, which provides a literature review of publications surveying the outcomes of school choice. EdChoice numerically quantifies how many of these surveys distinguish positive, neutral, and negative outcomes, where they were able to note that school choice resulted in 146 positive outcomes, a really high success rate. But just by a quick search of the references, not looking at every single title, I had some interesting statistics. So, of the 169 sources, 8% are their own publications, which isn't invalid but is very strange to include. 26% are from peer-reviewed journals or the Department of Education, which are otherwise credible sources. And these were the more interesting points. 27% of the publications were older than 2009, and 7% of the publications were older than 2000, which is to say that any of these analyses should be taken into account to how much time has changed since the school choice moment began and now, and how more robust the studies could be if done by peer-reviewed journals. The other report that I was interested in was the fiscal effects of school choice. And so this is essentially an analysis of how much you would save, the economy would save, if students attended private schools. And so this report has two main findings. For every $1 spent on public education, if a student went to private school, there would be a $1.8 to $2.86 savings if you fund an educational choice program. Now, I went through a little bit of the math, and so even the math is not very rigorous. And so the range is provided by because they couldn't figure out every tax distribution or every taxing system or how much it would actually affect the economy. And so instead they just did low and high projections, which is a good guess. But another point that's noteworthy is that in order for these high savings to be found, you need at least 50% of students who would be attending private school not receive any government funding. So this means they're all paying their tuition out of pocket, which of course would mean the United States would save money. So therefore, this doesn't really make sense or make a point of why we should support vouchers or educational savings accounts, which I thought was quite interesting to read just by taking a quick look. But comparable to their research turning out abilities, they provide a breadth and magnitude of legal assistance and lobbying in education to inform policymakers on the school choice movement. So since 2018, through the Legal Defense and Education Center, the LDEC, directed by Leslie Heiner, EdChoice provides, quote, legal expertise to policymakers, media outlets, and the legal community, which aim to identify and remove legal barriers to universal school choice. And so within these tasks, the LDEC is able to write legal reviews, provide bill drafts, give legal assistance, show support through amicus briefs to the courts, and provide legal education through extensive public outreach. Perhaps EdChoice's biggest stance in the legal community was when they filed an amicus brief in support of a recent Supreme Court ruling. This was for Espinoza versus Montana Department of Revenue, another legal battle that was showing the constitutionality of school vouchers for religious schools. And so they did the same again in Carson v. Mackin in 2023. So they're really having a huge reputation on the legal front. This was quite interesting moment of time in a very conservative Supreme Court. Heiner, who is the head of the LDEC, was on a podcast with the Pioneer Institute and shared these comments. With this Carson decision, what I'm really hoping for is that the language of this decision will be clear so that there won't be any kind of hesitation anymore. The hesitation meaning having more litigation to promote school choice in the United States. And while these public proceedings that go towards the courts or for our more litigious audiences, there's no fear. EdChoice has the American public version of all of these briefings and up to date on the status of school choice in the United States. And so they regularly publish an archive of every state that has made stances for school choice, and they also document any litigations against school choice in all the states. And they publish this every month online and through a podcast that has over 350 episodes that are 40-minute briefings. Evidently, EdChoice is a behemoth of information and support justifying and documenting school choice in the United States. Remember that they were part of a membership of Research Transparency before? Well, if you ask Drew Catt, who is the leader of research, they really emphasize finding legitimacy in their publications and research. On a spotlight of the Transparency Initiative Committee, part of the AAPOR, Drew Catt describes the contents of EdChoice publications are intended to provide empirical information and should not be construed as lobbying for any position related to any legislation. However, their two initiatives are related to working with policymakers and courts and providing legal consultation, which they use to cite. Do you remember the North Carolina legislation that passed recently? Well, the lead GOP legislator who passed it, who was previously a teacher and assistant principal, cited EdChoice in her statistics of justifying why we need to expand the role of vouchers in North Carolina. So therefore, their presence in media and presence in the lobbies and the courts and the legislation, EdChoice is going to be the loudest speaker on school choice initiatives in this decade. And so it's really important to be informed on how they operate and how they publish and whether we want to critique or analyze where they're coming from. That's my quick PowerPoint. Goodbye.